You ready? All right. Thank you, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Watertown Board of Adjustment meeting for Thursday, July 18th, 2019. Can I get a call to order, or a roll call, please?
Culhane,
Present.
Dargis Johnson. Here. Hanson,
Here.
Dolly,
Here.
Stein,
Here.
Kays,
Here.
Ford. Here. Oletsky, absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Jill. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes.
So moved.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Second item on the agenda is a applicant number 19693 for the Car Wash LLC. Jill?
Yes, the Car Wash LLC. All right. Brandon Bowling for the Car Wash LLC. The property address is 501 14th Avenue Northeast. Pursuant to 21-280311, the applicant seeks approval to operate storage units in the C3 Highway Commercial District and concurrently appeals the terms of the zoning ordinance as they apply to the 37,500 square foot parcel, seeking variances from 210302, which prohibits the design and creation of nonconforming structures, 211003, height and placement regulations, 21601, all required yards, setbacks shall be open, unoccupied space extending from the natural ground to the sky with no obstructions, and 21602, no adjacent open space shall be used to satisfy any yard or setback required for any other structure. No yard setback shall be reduced in dimension below the minimum requirement set for the district in which such yard or lot is located. This is to allow for the non-conforming 3,300 square foot, 30 by 110 foot building to be constructed 15 feet from the rear north property line where a minimum 30 foot is required. Staff finds that storage units is a listed conditional use for the C3 Highway Commercial District per 21-280311. The definition of storage units is a building or buildings for the storage of commercial or private goods and materials in individual units within a common structure without water or sewer utilities. The applicant submitted site plan and written request which reflect or do not reflect the following requirements of the ordinance. This board must review 21-0202 2B7A through H, which is specific rules governing individual conditional uses. This includes ingress and egress to the property, off-street parking and loading, screening, buffering, signage, refuse, exterior lighting, required yards and open space, and general compatibility with the area. The purpose of the C3 zone is to establish appropriate locations along major streets and highways for highway and automobile-related retail and service establishments, and to permit development of highway service centers in the appropriate locations shown in the comprehensive land use plan. The 2163 is off-street parking and loading requirements, and you will see on the site plan that he has given us some of his information on parking. And it is also subject to, or the application is subject to compliance with the landscape and lighting standards, Chapter 2173. The site plan is lacking details regarding screening and buffering, signage, refuse, and exterior lighting. The dumpsters must be screened. Again, it does not show that or where they are placed. Adequate screening of a parking lot from adjacent residentially used property shall be provided. There is no adjacent, as in directly adjacent residential property, but there is senior living dwellings up here in the 516th Avenue Northeast area here. Parking lot lighting. In order to maximize negative impact of parking lot lighting on adjacent properties, the city requires the use of shoebox lighting. This board must determine if satisfactory provision and arrangement has been made concerning 210202 2B7A through H and the chapters and sections I just described. If generally endorsed, the board may consider conditions of approval.
Thank you, Jill.
Mr. Chair, may I ask Jill a question before we proceed?
Yes.
This was noticed in the paper for the conditional use and the variance requests in the notice to the paper.
Correct.
Due to the nature of the request where quite frankly, the variance needs to be considered prior to the conditional use, because if we can't grant the variant, we have to decide, you know, maybe we take the conditional use permit up first, and then the conditional use, if it goes through, then we can address the variance. Because if we address the variance at first and then the conditional use, you know, there's a procedural element here. So prior to the public hearing, I would recommend to the chair that the public hearing be held on both requests, variance and the conditional use. But so that we don't get confused in the motions, I would begin by making a motion to approve the conditional use per the ordinance, absent the variance. And then from there, we can have a public hearing on all of the elements.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Thank you, Mr. Case. So we will open the public hearing on both aspects, but we'll take the motions independently.
Yes.
So I'll open the public hearing if there's anybody here to speak on behalf or against. Is the applicant here today?
Representative is here. Want to state your name?
Hi, Matt Redlin with Landmark Builders, representing the Car Wash LLC.
Mr. Redlin, the request for the variance on the rear yard setback, what's the reasoning or justification for that request?
Mostly boat storage and maneuverability in and out of the car wash with a boat or a trailer on it.
And that's based on the depth of the storage units that you're proposing?
Correct.
What's the depth of that storage unit?
30 foot.
Have you looked into the options of a shorter storage unit that would meet those requirements?
We have, but by the time you get a boat, you know, a Ranger boat that's 23 foot long, let's say, with the motor, with the tongue, I mean, you're right around 28 feet.
So we do have other storage units in town that are not necessarily designed to store a boat.
Correct.
Shorter bays, that do have an economic, purpose in the community. That's just not the business model that you're going after in this case. But
Yeah, I mean, we're just kind of going after the guys that have boats or trailers, you know, getting them out of the people's yard and into storage units.
Well,
Mr.
Go ahead.
Chair, would there be a possibility of narrowing up the existing drive path that comes out to the north of the car washes to assist in maybe moving the units further to the south?
There's a possibility, but it's, I mean, right now, the guys that have boats and trailers now that use the site drive over the grass.
Because if I'm correct, it shows that there's a 41-foot space between the north side of the car wash and the south side of the storage units.
41 foot from the north side of the car wash to the
edge of the
edge of
garage door.
asphalt.
Is that to the asphalt or to the garage door?
To the edge of asphalt. It's another 17 foot to the north.
So we're 58 feet is what that shows there. Okay, I
Correct.
see. So if that 58 feet, and we're 15 feet too close, is that correct, Joe?
Correct.
The
Yes.
The question is how bad of a backer-upper do you have to be to not be able to squeeze a boat in on a 43-foot? I was on Pepper Slough last week, and I backed a boat into the shore perpendicular with no issues there. My thinking is that even an old farm boy could back a trailer in, a 30-foot trailer in, even on a 40-foot square turn.
Well, we're also looking at too as people using the car wash.
Well,
The guy-
but you're also looking at having a shared use on the property.
Correct.
And you're using the driveway for both of those purposes, correct?
Yes.
I'm just saying it's possible that you could scrunch that thing further south and people could still have the ability to back a trailer into that. I'm just asking.
Yes.
Okay.
The problem that we have is that everyone that has a trailer or boat always uses that first bay, self-serve bay, because they can be able to swing around and exit it, the building without hitting the building. More room, the better.
Yeah, I get it. Have you,
Well, the more room, the better also applies to the 30-foot instead of the 15-foot setback. So I appreciate your statement on that.
have you, what do you propose for lighting? The shoebox lighting, as staff said?
Yes.
And where would you, are you going to have, are these units going to be lit as far as individual lighting over the top of each door, or?
No, we're proposing one on each end, east and west, and probably two on the south.
And
Nothing on the north.
are you proposing dumpsters to be associated with the storage units, a 2-yard dumpster or anything like that?
No.
So any garbage that accumulates there is just going to go into those garbage cans that are on the southeast side of the car wash?
Correct.
Staff, from the landscaping standpoint, is the current site meets the minimum landscaping, the boulevard, as far as the grass requirement?
There's no sidewalk or trail here proposed on this site plan. There's none in the area, immediate area, but I would probably ask if the board wants to approach a waiver of a right to protest or.
Currently, there's a bike trail on the south side of 14th Avenue.
I believe there's one on the north side.
But there's a bike trail or a bike lane on the south side of the 14th Avenue, right? I'm just saying, does the landscaping of the green space meet the minimum requirements in front of the building?
It is grass boulevard, that does.
Is there any tree planting requirements?
I'm not sure, I couldn't tell if these trees belong to this property.
In the boulevard, do we have boulevard tree planting requirements in the C3?
They have to just be on the development site, so there should be 5 trees on this site.
Are
for the
those
width of
trees to the
property.
north on theirs, or is that on the parking lot's property?
It's on our site,
So there are evergreen
right
trees.
at the property line.
Okay.
You're not looking at having any access doors on the north side of the garages?
None at all, just on the south.
Thank you.
Jill, are there 2 separate landowners on the north side?
This is a separate property here. This is the
Brown Clinic.
Brown Clinic, correct. And this one here is the senior living, I believe, Stony Brook.
So this would actually be an encroachment on, or a variance, if you will, on 2 separate landowners, 30-foot setback.
Well, the Brown Clinic extends across the back here, and then actually the other parcel here belonging to Redderath that would be an impediment on them, an impingement on them.
Did you receive any communication from any of the adjacent landowners?
No, I did not.
I did receive a call from Ed Spies saying that he was in favor of it and liked how the place is getting cleaned up.
Is there a bike trail on both sides of 14th Avenue? I thought there was. On the north and the south?
Yeah, Commissioner Ford, it appears, just looking at the aerials here, there is a shoulder lane on both sides. Now, I can't speak to as though one or both are designated bike path lanes. I assume at least one of them are, but without having that information in front of me, I can't speak to that. But there are 2 striped shoulders, one on each side of that roadway.
There is a sign up out there that says trail or bike lane or something like that, right in front of the
I believe
Cowboy.
most people use the south side when you see them out there. Mr. Chair, I have a question for staff. In 1996, the Board of Adjustment went to, Superwash came in for a special exception. That's what we called conditional uses back then. And it looks like to me that the Board of Adjustment in the minutes that provided by staff provided for the special exception for only a car wash. Was there anything else in the minutes or anything that you could find why they were only specifying a single use on that property back in 1996?
That's all they wanted at that time.
Also, within the city's regulations, we do allow more than one principal structure on a commercial lot. That's correct?
Yes.
Are there any specifics requiring dumpsters for each, if there are two individual unrelated uses? Do each site need to have dumpsters? Or-
There's no specific instruction in our ordinance about that. It's just that each parcel that is developed is, obviously is going to have some kind of a receptacle, and they have to be screened, and they should be, identified as to where they're located on the site plan, but
So the car wash dumpsters would meet that requirement?
possibly. It's up to you, yep.
And are they screened?
Not right now, no. They
Do you have-
haven't been.
Okay.
There's trees that are right adjacent to on the property line. I use this car wash 3 times a week, so I'm very familiar with it. But I think there are trees that line up next to I'm not sure what side, if they're on the Brown Clinic side or if they're on the applicant side, but there are trees where those,
Right here.
yeah.
So probably right here. This is probably the 2 dumpsters here?
They're small trash receptacles when
Okay.
you're vacuuming your car.
Are trees screening? What's the definition of screening?
You can
that meets
use
that. All right.
live greenery
Okay.
or fences.
And the adequate screening of the parking lot from adjacent residential property, how does that apply to this? Since it's not
Adjacent.
touching, but it's nearby.
It's not adjacent.
What's adjacent?
Adjacent would be touching property lines.
Is it, Matt? It is. Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions for Mr. Rudlin? Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak before I close the public hearing? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Chair, there is a motion on the floor that has not been seconded, and I would just restate my motion to approve the conditional use for the use of a storage garage. And if we move forward with a yes on that, then we are going to have to decide whether or not size and scope and location.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second. Before we take a vote on that, I would just say that the conditional use of storage units does seem to me to be consistent with the zoning district as well as the location being adjacent to both a highway and a major collector route. This is a use case scenario that we've done in other areas of town, including the dual use on a commercial property. So from the standpoint strictly of the conditional use, it seems to be within the realm that we've done before. I'll go ahead and take a vote. Jill?
Just one moment.
Go ahead.
Do we want to discuss the waiver right to protest at this point in time or not? Do we want it at all, period?
What would we be waiving the right to protest?
Well,
For the boulevard
each
improvements?
property is supposed to have sidewalk or trail.
Okay, do we reasonably expect to see a sidewalk in front of the Cowboy or the Brown Clinic in the foreseeable future, or if we're using a large oversized bike trail on the south side of the road? That's my question.
Commissioner Case, if I could Mr. Chairman, respond to that. Under one circumstance, I could see if the widening of that roadway, that bike lane area would need to be utilized for traffic purposes for additional lanes. That'd be one case where we would maybe would implement some sidewalk or off-street pathway.
I'm all right with that.
And this being a major collector route.
I would then, Mr. Chair, like to make an motion to my previous amendment to include waiver right to protest any future installation of sidewalk if required by the city.
Mr. Colhane.
Second.
Thank you. Any additional discussion before we vote?
Same, I guess my question is buffering. Is there adequate buffering on the north side of that property?
Mr. Chair, I think that could be something that could
Or-
be addressed with the variance depending
All
on
right.
if this thing moves forward. Because if we decide that a variance is to be allowed, we could always add more, we could always require more screening or buffering.
Perfect.
Any additional comments? We'll call for a vote.
Okay, Stein. Yep, vote.
Yes.
Okay, Hanson.
Yes.
Dargis Johnson. Yes. Kays.
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes.
Colhane.
Yes.
Motion passes for conditional use only at this time.
Thank you, Jill.
Just to get the thing kicking down the road, Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion to approve the 15-foot side yard setback with the caveat that if approved, additional screening needs to be implemented. Then we could have that discussion of what that looks like
Along the north property line.
along the north property line.
We have a motion and a second. Take additional discussion from the board.
The only comment I feel is he could still put storage units there without having to encroach onto that 30 feet setback by moving, making them a little smaller and still having the storage dual use on that property.
So you're saying scrunching up the depth of the
Correct. You can
storage
scrunch them
unit
both ways.
and then actually moving them a little bit further to the south and still have adequate room for turning and loading and unloading.
Correct.
I agree with you, Rhonda. I think coming at it from both sides, a little smaller and a little bit in would be the appropriate. And I do compliment the owner on cleaning up that property. That's certainly true, and I think we're all pleased with that. But I do agree that it would be better to implement it as Rhonda described.
I think it would matter a lot more if there was an adjacent residential or commercial structure, but considering that there's 40 or 50 or 60 feet of parking lot to the north of it, the setback doesn't seem like it matters as much to me. I mean, that the purpose of the setback is to create room for sound, for site issues, for fire issues, things like that. So I could see not granting a variance in the setback in other instances, but if there was ever one to do it, this seems like it's pretty non-offensive to the neighboring, and given that nobody's commented on it.
I would say, agree with Mr. Culhane, and I also would say that for the 15 feet that is being requested, the offset of that would be the safety of backing in the trailers or utilizing and accessing the storage units, because not everyone is as skilled as our friend Mr. Kays when it comes to backing up trailers. So I think that is a reasonable trade-off, the setback for the safety of a larger maneuverable area to access the storage units.
And what kind of screening are we talking about in the motion?
I think that would be, Mr. Chair, I will rephrase my motion to state that in the event that a variance is granted, the applicant be required to plant trees similar to what is consistent there right now, a minimum of 6-foot tall conifers spaced out, so in a manner to create a fence effect.
Second.
Thank you.
Did that answer
It did, thank you. And I appreciate your comments, Liam, about what you indicated about that. This particular site being so specific in this area. So it is worth a second thought about that.
Do we want to address the dumpster issue? If we're going to be storing boats there, I can see fish getting clean there, and we might have a little bit of an odor.
I think one thing to note on those storage units is that this site would need to be without water or sewer utilities in these units.
Well, yeah, in the unit, but you have a car wash right there. And I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there, guys.
I would Mr. Redland, would you want to come up here, please? Would the applicant be so inclined to put a sign up saying no fish cleaning on site?
I think they would love that because right now they already get people that throw fish guts in them trash dumpsters already.
And I don't know, there's no screening that's going to stop that odor from.
No, there's no screen. There's no one to stop putting fish guts in the dumpster.
Mr. Chair, I will also then amend my motion to include some sort of signage or education to the users of the storage units that they can't clean fish on site.
Mr. Culhane, would you
Second.
second that?
Do the dumpsters have lids
Yes.
or are they open?
It's just a little hole that you can shove a small bag or a beer can or a hot can or something on. It's like when you go to a car wash. It's just
So is that adequate dumpsters for 10 or however many units these are? Have you ever rented a storage unit? I mean, I have, and there's generally a lot of trash that comes out.
I do have a storage unit, and I don't have a dumpster near mine, so,
You don't? Okay.
but I don't know if it's common practice or not.
I'd call the previous question.
Any additional discussion? No. We'll take a vote on the motion. A motion and a second on the table.
Roll call?
Yep.
Okay. Kays,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Dargits Johnson,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes?
Stein,
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
Am I missing anybody? Motion passes.
Thank you, Joe. Next item on the agenda is applicant Ashley Fox, DBA The Painted Fox LLC, number 19689. Have you take us through that one, Joe?
Yes, the owner of the property is Watertown Development Company. The applicant is Ashley Fox. The property address is 208 East Kemp, suite number 1. This property is divided into 2 suites, east and west. Pursuant to zoning ordinance 21-24034 Bar or Tavern, applicant seeks site approval to be eligible to apply for alcoholic beverage licenses, which may include video lottery, on this property located in the C1 Community Commercial District, contingent upon compliance with 2401, the purpose of the C1 zone, 210202 2B7A through H, specific rules governing individual conditional uses, and 2.0102 location. Staff finds that bar or tavern is a listed conditional use for the C1 Community Commercial District per 21-24034. The definition of bar or tavern is any establishment, including restaurants and gambling establishments, licensed to sell alcoholic beverages for consumption upon the premises where sold or provided. The term bar or tavern shall also include establishments licensed to sell alcoholic beverages for consumption off the premises where sold. The applicant submitted a floor plan and written request which reflect or do not reflect the following requirements of the ordinance. 210202 2B7A through H is the specific rules governing individual conditional uses that includes ingress and egress to the property, off-street parking, loading, screening, buffering, signage, exterior lighting, required yards and open space, and general compatibility with the neighborhood. The purpose of this C1 zone is to provide retail and service uses that serve the whole community and supply a wide range of goods and services required by the primary marketable population, and to permit development of community retail centers of a size and in the locations shown in the comprehensive land use plan. 2.0102 location that I referred to just a moment ago, that is about being so far from a boys, girls club, church, community center, that kind of a thing. The C1 zone is actually exempt, so we can check that one off. Chapter 2163 is off-street parking and loading requirements and engineering design standards. Again, the C1 zone is exempt from this, so parking is, or off-street parking is actually not an issue because the C1 zone is not considered there. And then Chapter 2173, landscape and lighting standards as it pertains to the boulevard, again, C1 exempt. So this board must determine if satisfactory provision and arrangement has been made concerning 210222B7A through H, what does apply, and the chapters and sections that I just mentioned. If generally endorsed, the board may consider conditions of approval.
Thank you, Jill. And just a point of clarity, I guess, the request here is strictly for the conditional use to operate bar or tavern, so blessing the location, the land as acceptable for this kind of use. The applicant would subsequently have to go before the city council to apply for a license.
That's already happened, hasn't it?
Actually, this occasionally happens with us. The cart comes before the horse. The city council has granted license conditional on this board granting blessings to the property.
Thank you.
Mr. City Attorney, did anything come up during the hearing with the city council? Any questions, concerns?
No.
Thank you.
I'm going to open the public hearing if anybody's here to speak on behalf or against.
Ashley is here.
Jill, just for my clarification, so if we give approval for a conditional use, is it the whole property or is it just that side? What are our options there?
Well, as far as the way I wrote up the application, it's for Suite 1 in particular. The other side is an insurance company, so you would make note in your motion as to this suite only.
And Jill, the other quick question, it's more of a procedural and historical application of conditional uses. In this situation, if Ms. Fox decides to quit doing her business 5 years down the road and she transfers Suite 101 to whoever, does the conditional use for the alcohol or beer sales transfer with that sale of the property, or can we restrict the CUP to only apply to this specific use that it's associated with?
We have made restrictions in the past.
Thank you.
I just have a strange question about the liquor license, and maybe it's not, but I thought that if you had liquor, that you had to serve food in order to have children come.
It's beer and wine only.
Beer and wine, but you can have children there with beer and wine? That's not considered 21. I'm just asking. I mean, and I assume you're going to sell it, Ashley?
It's
Or-
only going to be for events where adults are in the
But is
evening.
it going to be?
No,
I
it's
mean,
going to be locked in the back.
But, I mean, are you going to charge for the beer if I order?
I have to charge for it,
Okay,
yes.
okay, so it's not, so that's my, I guess I've always thought that you had to be able to serve food in order to mix that.
Ashley, my understanding is this would be when people decide to have a glass of wine and paint a picture or
Correct.
make an urn or something like that.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not going to be
But-
just come in and drink
No,
whenever.
I understand that, but if I'm there and then, I'm having a glass of wine and then there's children doing the same
They
project
won't be
with
in
me,
there
you
when
won't
there's-
do mixed ages?
No. It's only going to be for couples nights, ladies nights, groups that want to get together and do something as a group and have wine or beer.
Ashley, in the overall scope of thing, this would be a very minor, there's really no large monies that are gonna be made off
No,
that
it's
aspect.
simply just the money that I'll be charging is simply a convenience fee for me to purchase it and have it in my facility.
And I get that, and I mean, I think it's a great idea. I just always thought that that was how it was, that you had to have food in order to have both. That's all.
Off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to that. I don't believe that that's the case, but I would have to research that. And if
Certainly, the applicant would be, responsible to follow all laws governing the sale of alcohol. This is strictly to bless the conditional use that this site and location is consistent with our requirements to be able to serve these kind of beverages.
I know, it's just Pandora's box.
Any additional questions for Ms. Fox?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion once we close the public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the conditional use permit to Sweet, whichever number Jill said it was, and that the conditional use is not the beer and alcohol aspect of the conditional use is not transferable to a subsequent owner unless they're doing a like use.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? We'll take a roll call vote, Jill, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Kays,
Yes.
Stein,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
and Colhane.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is an applicant for Jesse Craig of the Lofts LLC, number 19691. Jill?
The Jesse Craig for the Lofts LLC is the applicant. The property address is, this is a redevelopment lot, but it will be 10 North Broadway. Conditional use request pursuant to 21-2403-24, apartments over 4 units using the upper floors of commercial buildings. The applicant seeks approval to construct and operate a 3-story, 39-unit apartment complex over ground floor commercial uses on property located in the C1 Community Commercial District, contingent upon compliance with 21-2401 purpose of the C1 zone and 21-0202 2B7A through H, specific rules governing individual conditional uses. Staff finds that apartments over 4 units using the upper floors of commercial buildings is a listed conditional use for the C1 Community Commercial District. The definitions of apartment, dwelling unit, apartment house, and multifamily are as follows. Apartment, see dwelling unit. Dwelling unit is a residential accommodation including complete kitchen facilities permanently installed, which are arranged, designed, used for, or intended for use exclusively as living quarters for one family. An apartment house, see dwelling multifamily, and multifamily is a residential building designed or occupied by 3 or more families. This is a redevelopment project in downtown Watertown where a building has recently burned down in the historic district. The applicant submitted a site plan, floor plans, and written request which reflect or do not reflect the following requirements of the ordinance. Again, we're looking at 21-0202-B7A through H, specific rules governing individual conditional uses, which includes ingress and egress, off-street parking, loading, screening, buffering, signage, exterior lighting, required yards and open space, and general compatibility with the area. The purpose of the C1 zone is to provide retail and service uses that serve the whole community and supply a wide range of goods and services required by the primary marketable population, and to permit development of community retail centers of a size and in the locations shown in the comprehensive land use plan. We can check off chapters 2163 and 2173, which is dealing with off-street parking and loading and landscape and lighting again, because the C1 zone is exempt from these. So this board must determine if satisfactory provision and arrangement has been made concerning the chapters and sections described above, and if generally endorsed, the board may consider conditions of approval.
Thank you, Joe. I'd like to open the public hearing. If there's anybody to speak on behalf or against, please approach the microphone. Is the applicant here? Go ahead and state your name for the record.
Jesse Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Craig.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I wanted to just begin by saying that I support the concept of the redevelopment of Uptown Watertown, and I think this is just could be potentially just be a new anchor, something that's very positive for the community. I do have a couple quick questions regarding the underground parking, which is new to the city of Watertown.
Yes, sir.
The ramp that's going down, is that going to be like a gated ramp, or you have to have a card to swipe, or how's that going to work?
Yeah, so it'll be a doghouse that'll be sitting on the, what would be the northeast corner.
Okay.
That'll have a garage door on it, and then either we give key fobs to the tenants, or they'd have a sensor on their dash, so when they approach it, then it would open and close behind them.
That was my, because otherwise my concern for downtown Saturday night, open ramp could be interesting.
Correct.
The other quick question is, while the city has not formally adopted or the proposed changes to our uptown design standards, have you had any conversations with city staff on what we're looking for, wanting to make the uptown look like on these redevelopment projects? Would you be willing to consider constructing to those standards, even though they're not technically required of you at this time?
Yeah, I'd actually go above and beyond those. We've had those discussions in regards to previously there wasn't really a lot of detail in that for the amount of glass that's required or the amount of brick and certain exterior materials. And from more, up north where I come from, that's kind of one of the things. And I'm building these to own them, not to sell them. I'm not just a developer. I'm also an owner and a property manager of them. My children will inherit them. So I'm building them to stand the test of time.
Thank you.
Yep.
A question on the parking that's on-surface parking. Is that going to be open to the public?
Correct.
Primarily to serve the retail operations that you have there?
That and or just citizens that are frequenting downtown for walkability. And there has been some previous conversations about the parking, that there's no time limits on the parking right now in front of the businesses. So that'll probably come up at a later date and have that discussion.
Do you have any proposed commercial uses already in play or plans for? I mean, you don't have to say who they are, I think, but do you have some tenants potentially lined up?
We've been in conversations with quite a few.
Awesome.
I'm confused by the uptown downtown.
Well, it depends on what.
Downtown,
Right.
Todd.
I had a book given to me on it, so I've been doing my research.
When we lived, when I grew up, it was always going uptown,
Right.
but now it's downtown, and
Hard to change your. Right.
So it looks like based on the floor plan that you could have up to 4 individual retailers, but that would maybe depend on what you get in there.
Yeah, there could be up to 7 actually. I mean, typically you're looking at the kind of the pedestrian walkability that we're trying to look at is going to be probably anywhere from 1,000 to 1,700 square feet of bay for the storefronts. When you get bigger than that, then it's just a different tenant that you would get down there, and we're looking like sandwich shops or ice cream shops, things like of that nature. So the people that are going to live in this project are going to be the ones that are going to probably frequent these. So we kind of look for that type of a tenant in there.
On your floor plan, the certain units here, the bedrooms do not show that they're on an outside wall, so therefore do not have windows in them.
Yep, and we're working on that right now because, again, I got to talk to the city staff a little bit about that as we get closer to finalizing those plans. Typically, on an inside bedroom, there wouldn't be a wall that would go all the way to the ceiling. There'd be a probably a 3/4 wall, things like that, and it wouldn't be a door that closes necessarily. It would be a barn door. And so we're trying to look at different ways to utilize the space to the best of the use of it. And again, as you're looking at it, they get real long and narrow. So we're trying to figure out how to make those fit a little better.
You're not proposing any sort of outdoor patios extending out and above or anything like that?
No, we're not going to look for an easement. And again, when you're looking at high density, lot line to lot line, number one, I don't want anyone dropping a beer bottle on somebody's head or a pop bottle or whatever they're using out there. Also, the people that tend to frequent, a project like this, when they're home, they're usually after work showering, getting ready to go out. And again, the walkability is amazing. They're going to want to go to their nearest restaurant, establishment, and sit on the sidewalk or sit on their patio versus on a little 4x8 patio outside of their apartment. So yeah, we're not going to have any balconies on these.
The only dumpster enclosure that I saw was on the southeast corner of the property. With the number of units and retail establishments here, is that going to be a sufficient dumpster square footage to serve all those?
Really depends on, again, how close the city wants it to the, to the property. Also, you look at accessibility for the dump truck to come in and go. And the amount of concrete that they drive on, because they end up doing damage over time. Literally, it's the amount of frequency that's picked up versus the size of the dumpster.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, I apologize that I'm new to town, so I don't know if there's the availability to have services, more frequently down here or not. There is? Okay. Usually for an extra charge, we'd have it picked up twice a week or something like that. And again, as we kind of analyze that as we go along will be the biggest factor. Or if you have people moving out the end of the month, then you have a little bit more trash typically when people are cleaning out their units if there's turnover and things. So
Because the uptown's all on private, correct?
Downtown?
Downtown.
Yes.
Yeah, Commissioner Kays, that's my understanding is this would be considered as part of the commercial pickup that is all done privately through private haulers.
And it does say enclosure there, that would be a completely screened-in dumpster.
Correct.
What's your timetable?
To start a demo
Yeah.
in the next
To
week.
be moved in.
Moved in, so start probably demo in the next week and a half. 12-month probably, 10 to 12-month build period, and then probably a 10 to 12-month stabilization period.
What are you
So-
demoing?
The existing building, the burrito shop that's sitting there, we'd have to demo that, and then we have to completely demolish the footings and foundation that are still there from the building that burnt, and then we have to take down the existing parking lot.
Have you had an asbestos inspection planned for that Burritos on Broadway building?
That I have not. I don't own the building yet, so I would have to.
I just see the asbestos isn't, yes or no, isn't circled on this conditional permit, so that's something that you'll,
Okay,
okay,
we can definitely address that.
thank you.
And I don't know if the one that burnt, if anything was done on that or not. I could use the same agency that did that one.
Any additional questions from the board? Thank you.
Thank you.
Jill, we received any comments from adjoining property owners?
I have not.
Seeing no additional public comment, I'll close the public hearing. Ask for a motion.
I'll move to approve this conditional use permit, 19691.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Take a vote, Joe.
Ford,
Yes.
Colhane,
Emphatically, yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Stein, Dolly,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson, Kays.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5 on the agenda, Robert and Don Johnson, number 19690.
Okay, the applicants are Robert and Don Johnson. This is the property. It's address 316 3rd Street Southeast. The application was submitted requesting to construct a non-conforming 480 square foot 20 by 24 addition onto an existing 600 square foot 20 by 30 attached garage, creating one 1,080 square foot non-conforming structure on a 16,500 square foot parcel. Said structure is proposed to be constructed 6.9 feet from the side south property line, where a minimum 9 feet is required. The application was denied based on the following ordinance regulations. 210302 prohibits the design and creation of non-conforming structures. 211001 is the height and placement regulations. And 21601 and 602 relate to required setbacks that shall be open, unoccupied space, and no adjacent space shall be used to satisfy any yard setback required for any structure, and no yard or setback shall be reduced in dimension below the minimum requirements set forth in the district in which they are located. The applicant appeals those above regulations. The staff finds that if enlarging a nonconforming structure is generally endorsed, or the nonconforming structure, the 480 square foot addition could be constructed compliant to current minimum required setback requirements by offsetting, for instance, 2.1 feet to the north, because per 210202 2C1D, any variance granted under the provision of this section shall be the minimum adjustment necessary for the reasonable use of the land. Offsetting would create a compliant addition on a non-conforming existing structure.
Thank you, Jill. I'd like to open the public hearing. If anybody's here to speak on behalf or against. Is the applicant in the house tonight? You come forward.
Bob, have you talked to your neighbor about the encroachment onto their, close to their property? I mean, I know your existing garage is there. Have they given you any indication what, how they feel about your idea?
I've specifically talked to 4 of the neighbors. The neighbor most impacted would be directly south of us. They had no objections to us adding that non-conforming structure onto the present garage, following the existing sidewalls and roof line of that existing structure, as well as the neighbor across the alley to the east of us, the neighbor across the road to the west, and also 2 lots to the northeast of us, who also made the comment, you're not building it big enough.
Jill, had you received any other communication?
Just one was received just before this meeting. I was not given a name, but I believe it was adjacent across the alley.
And they were in favor of?
I'm sorry, they supported it.
Thank you. For my reference, kind of as a matter of history, if you know, on this lot, it is unique in that most R2A lots are
50 feet wide?
50 feet wide or less, kind of substandard lot. This one is far from substandard. It looks to be 2 lots combined into one.
Correct.
Were they combined at some point more recent than most of the lots are platted in the R2A district?
Or is your house and garage has always been that way, part of on the 2 lots?
Going back to 1938, when the original house was constructed, was a house sitting on the north lot. The south lot was purchased. The north house was raised. The new house built on at that time. So 1938 is when the house was built. I don't know when the 2 garages were built on that property.
With the house that straddles both the properties then would have been 1938, so they've effectively been one lot since that time.
That's correct.
And Jill, the the R2A minimum setback is 5 foot for the side yard unless, if it's a 50-foot lot or less. Is that what the rule is?
6 foot,
6 foot.
10%, minimum 6 foot.
correct.
And what's the standard side yard in the regular R2 and the R1 districts?
Well, the minimum lot size is supposed to be
75 feet.
75 feet, and in that case, it would be 9 foot. But they do, not so much in the R1, but the R2s usually go down to the 50-foot, 6-foot side yards. Just one clarification, if I may. In the permit history, in 1977, there was a brick home built, and in 1982, there was a garage built. I don't know which one.
And at the time of the 82, was that garage in compliance with the rules in 1982?
It didn't, well, I'm not sure about that.
There's no record of a variance ever being obtained or needed?
No, not back that far.
Do we know which garage that was? The one on the rear property line's only 3.5 feet off the property line. Was there a variance at that time in the records that you can see?
Not that I saw, not that I found.
You know, what's interesting with this lot, like you alluded to, Mr. Kays, is that if this was on a normal 50-foot R2A lot, it would meet the setback requirements. This particular lot being two lots that are combined, it's a little bit different than the average house you see in this area.
That, in addition, it seems that the city has had no problem issuing at least 2 building permits for property that encroaches 6 feet in that
Right.
area in the past, and that there are further no objections to the neighbors to the south where the encroachment is going to, impacting them the most. This is problematic. I mean, I hate the whole aspect about granting variances is a difficult one. But sometimes if the existing garage wasn't already there, or the garage further to the east wasn't already there, I would be inclined to say no.
What is your objection to not offsetting it 2.5 feet to the north?
Just
Or
the
2.1.
aesthetics, easier to build a straight wall than making a jog in a wall. Now we've got 2 feet of structure that doesn't really look conforming to the rest of the building attached to it. And kind of that old country boy logic, you got 1 wall existing, build on 3 more and you're good to go.
So you're gonna knock out the back wall of that and make that one long garage then, or what?
The plan is to leave that existing wall in place, and the property slopes from the west to the east, so drop the side wall down, gain a little additional height storage, and then have basically 2 different structures with a partition wall between the 2 garages.
Would there be that firewall then in between those 2?
Would make it a firewall with sheetrock and that type of thing.
So you would not be able to access that with your vehicles then?
No, not from the front garage, but would propose a garage door through the north wall into the yard.
So you'd access it off the alley then?
Actually, through the yard.
Through the yard if he needs to. He's got it.
Right there, yep.
See, but if he had to, he could come down through here and come like that.
Jill, you might have already touched on this, but has there been a development lot agreement between lots 10 and 11?
I don't believe so, but that would be part of the deal to build this. And it would be good if you'd put it in your motion if you're so inclined.
I agree with you, though. It would look worse offsetting it than lining it up.
Is there a reason that you're not adding on to the garage in the back?
The
instead of
garage,
this one? Yeah. if
the
you're-
garage on the back currently sits at grade level, so during the spring thaw, we do get some runoff from the north alley, comes down into the garage for a few days while the ground is thawing. Once the ground thaws, able to absorb the moisture, then the moisture disappears in the garage. So you look at the options of, do I raise that floor, getting away from that moisture problem, or do I move over, ask for a variance to construct that addition, make a nice shop area, and then at some point in the future, another landowner could address that rear garage issue.
Well, my the reason I ask that is the next owner might want to take a driveway all the way up from the alley into the yard to get to that door that's facing that way, but.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. We got a motion from the board?
I make a motion to approve the applicant's request contingent upon the city and the applicant reaching a mutually agreeable development agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Culhane. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second. Any additional discussion?
I'm just looking at what the staff found here, where it says, any variance granted under the provisions of this section shall be the minimum adjustment necessary for the reasonable use of the land. And I guess I don't think aesthetics is preventing them from the reasonable use of the land, that adjusting it 2.1 feet to the north.
My finding, if I intend to vote yes in this matter, and the finding is going to be based upon the uniqueness of this lot being zoned R2A, which normally would require a 6-foot variance if it was only a part of a 50-foot lot, and being that he is has 2 lots combined together, he's being penalized in that regard, and so that's my basis for approval.
It appears to be sort of a strange and unintentional consequence of the statute of the greater than 6-foot language.
And being that if this was a virgin piece of ground, I'd say no. But
Thank you. Go ahead and take a vote on it. Jill?
Colleen,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Stein. Yes. Ford,
No.
Dargits Johnson,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes.
and Kays.
yes.
1 no, motion passes.
Thank you, Jill. Moving on to item 6 on the agenda, applicant Larry Henman, number 19692.
All right. This is the property, addressed 826 South Broadway. Larry Henman is the owner and applicant. Application was submitted requesting to construct a non-conforming 884 square foot, 26 by 34 addition onto a 4,064 square foot commercial building located in the C3 Highway Commercial District. Said structure proposed to be constructed 13 feet from the rear east property line, where a minimum 30 feet is required, 6 foot 6 feet from the side or north property line, where a minimum 20 feet is required, and 15 feet from the side or south property line, where a minimum 20 feet is required. The application was denied based on the following ordinance regulations. 210302 prohibits the design and creation of nonconforming structures. 211003 are height and placement regulations for the commercial zones. 216001, all required yards or setbacks shall be open, unoccupied space extending from the natural ground level to the sky with no obstructions. And 216002, no adjacent open space shall be used to satisfy any yard or setback required for any other structure. And no yard setback shall be reduced in dimension below the minimum requirements set for the district in which such yard is located. The applicant appeals those requirements of the current zoning ordinance. Staff finds that currently the property utilizes 6 unapproved inset boulevard parking spaces on South Broadway for customer parking. This addition that they are proposing would eliminate some of the few existing required off-street parking spaces they have on this property, of which 20 off-street parking spaces are required and 3 will remain.
Thank you, Jill. Go ahead and open the public hearing. If anybody's here to speak on behalf or against.
Hi, my name's Larry Henman, and we simply got a room. We've outgrown our store. We need more space, and we want to build within the boundaries we already are in. As far as that parking issue goes, we very seldom have 6 customers in our store at any given time. We would be able to park between our building and Doc Howard. There's a spot there we could put a vehicle if need be. And then we had a transformer put in, since we put in 3-phase power to the building. There's a transformer on that southeast corner. There would be parking available there. So there's 8 spots if needed. Would we have, we would be able to park inside that if need be. I mean, we're not always going to have a trailer or something in there. I mean, it's just.
How many employees do you have there?
That's myself and my wife, my son-in-law and daughter. We come together in the same vehicle, and one other employee, and we would like to hire one more.
I have a question for Jill. So you were counting that the east side as parking. Okay, because
Correct.
you lost.
Yep.
I wasn't quite following you there at first, but for customers when they come, they don't park. Do they park in the back?
They do not. They park up front on the west side of our building.
Right, and even by this addition, you're not necessarily going to increase the traffic flow to your business at any one time in terms of needing more parking, other than what you're now utilizing on the west side of the building. Am I correct?
Correct.
And Jill, the reason that those parking spaces in the front are not counted in the application here is because they're on the public right-of-way?
Correct, they are parked, basically, I couldn't find where they were approved or at any time, so any car parked there would be parked across the boulevard and possibly over the walkway.
Well, when we put new concrete in the west side of the building, we had to make the sidewalk next to the building and then slope it back to the street to get the grade. I mean, that was special circumstances at that point in time too, so.
Mr. Hammond, where will the new addition line up with respect to the building to the north?
The addition would come out from the northeast corner, 26 feet towards the alley, and then back to the south, 34 feet, and then back into the building, 24 feet.
It would not further encroach your existing neighbor to the north. It's just gonna be built in line,
Doc Howard's building, it would actually be inside that,
inside that line.
yes.
But that would not leave enough remaining area on the east side, Jill, to count as parking spots?
I could squeeze a car in there very easily, there's 11 feet.
To the east, there would be room, we figured, for about 3 parking spots without moving a car to move another, and those rules applying.
Would that diagonally parking or parallel parking or?
A little of both, yeah.
Sir, do you happen to know the age of that building, how old that building is that you're in?
I don't have that information with me.
More than 40 years?
I would assume so.
So permit history shows there was an addition as far back as 1961. Looks like the construction of those buildings are more in line with the historic buildings we have in downtown Watertown, where the district is 0 lot line.
Correct. That's actually 3 buildings there.
Your drawing shows that there's garage doors back there. Is that correct?
Excuse me?
Are those garage doors that I'm looking at in the drawing, or am I mistaken? Off the backside?
Yes, there would be 3 garage doors back there.
And can I ask what the purpose of that would be? I mean, is this for workspace or storage or?
Workspace, storage, back a vehicle in, put vinyl graphics on it.
That is one other issue where we typically have to have a 20-foot parking space or length between the garage door and the property line for a parking space or a,
Is that a requirement in the C3 zone or just in the R1 residential zones?
it's actually for,
Only when it crosses sidewalks, correct?
no,
Any,
it applies to any parking in front of a garage door situation. I'm not sure that it doesn't
I mean-
apply to both residential and commercial.
that's my question.
Yeah. I
You're not
believe so.
sure?
Well, I'm not sure.
Who does the snow removal there?
Does the what?
Who does the snow removal?
Zach Whiff moved it last year.
So everybody there does their own, or are you guys all kind of in a, y'all split
Doc
that?
Howard and us kind of shared responsibility to the front, and then Steve Horning, I mean, he would push them over occasionally. We would push them over occasionally. It depends on the snow, the amount we have, and what we have to do with it at the given time.
Do you move it out? I mean, you must haul it out.
We have in the past.
Joe, what is the minimum number of feet required to count as a parking spot? Because they had 13 feet remaining after the addition. How many feet would they need to have to count as a parking spot?
Well, parking right in front of a garage door, the minimum is typically 9 by 18.5.
So,
So, but
5
20 is what's stated in the ordinance. I was just looking for that. But a parking spot, according to our parking standards, is typically 9 by 18.5. Is that right? Yeah,
so it'd be 5.5 feet too short then.
correct.
Can the parking space be perpendicular to the garage? Then
Like-
it would fit.
Yes, but you wouldn't, yeah, you would only count outside parking spaces as parking. It's also the fact that people pause in front of their garage doors and, you know,
Who's going to be pausing in front of the garage door? I mean,
Or park.
in reality, in this situation, I'll wait till the applicant's done. I have a rant that I want to go on.
Where do you do your decaling now, when you have a vehicle to do?
Excuse me?
Where do you do your decaling now? Where do you put the vehicle?
Either my son-in-law's garage or my garage,
You take it home?
Yes,
Is what
ma'am.
you're saying?
or customers.
So there's not access through the alley with an overhead door into your building now?
We do not.
But this would include that then?
It would.
Okay.
Any
Is-
additional questions for the applicant?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
With parking to the north, do you plan on using that area, just for the adjacent property? They have an access door to the south there. Would you be parking a car there and blocking that?
No, the door sets back far enough. It's not likely a car would ever get parked there. I'm saying we could. It's for short term, shuffling stuff around.
And any of the adjacent neighbors? Jill, did you hear anything?
I didn't catch that.
no, I didn't hear anything from neighbors. I will, if I can clarify, I did find that. The ordinance says that a garage permitted prior to July 11/2008, which is entered perpendicular to an alley, shall not be located closer than 9 feet to the alley line. And a garage permitted after July 2008, which is entered perpendicular to an alley, shall not be located closer than 20 feet to an alley line. A garage which is entered parallel to the alley or shall not be closer than 9 feet. But this is in fact under residential accessory uses.
That's what I thought.
Thank you, Joe.
As far as adjacent landowners, I did hear from Doc Howard, and that was just his concern as far as access to his building from that south door.
It would not obstruct. No, there's no.
Good deal.
Thank you, Mr. Henman.
Mr. Chair, it seems by just the number of variances that are in front of me and in front of this board that it's quite obvious that the zoning regulations, for all practical purposes, have taken nearly 99% of the usable aspect of this property without a variance. And so you take, the next step was, well, if this property was clean and I wanted to come and build, could I do anything on this property without a variance? The answer is no, right? So back in 2005, the city had commissioned a study to look at all non-conforming lots up and down highways 212, 81, 20, and all residential areas within the community. Now, a couple things did come out of that study. The R2A zoning district was created, but we never took out a look at trying to fix the issues along the highways. Specifically along Highway 212, that study indicated that there are probably over 30 of these types of lots along that stretch of the road. And some of the recommendations that came out of that study stated that we should somehow grandfather, or especially bless those existing commercial uses, allowing them to do things in the future, such as C3 zone ownership parcels platted and containing non-conforming structures as of then January 1st of 2005, which have an existing minimum front yard setback of less than 40 feet, but more than 35 feet, she'll have to have 35 feet. But we also took a look at if you don't meet that minimum setback, you're not going to be penalized as long as the addition doesn't further go into the zoning, into your non-conforming area. We also talked about in that study that C3 zoned ownership parcels platted and containing non-conforming structures prior to January 2005 and an existing non-conforming structure, as long as the minimum front yard setback is not further encroached upon. I said that already, but we also talked a little bit about the lot area. Many of these lots don't contain 20,000 square feet. So it just seems to me that the rules themselves are onerous in this situation and not allowing anybody to do anything with this property, whether this was an addition onto this lot or if God came in and smited out, what would he be able to do with this property? And I think without a variance, then the answer would be no. And if we were going to hold to the issuance of variances being very rarely, we might as well just buy this property and we got a nice big open corner that the city has. So I think in this situation, I would be reluctantly willing to say yes to the variance as requested, but I think it's the onus is on the Planning Commission and the City Council to go back to that study that was commissioned 15 years ago and take a look at making amendments to the ordinance that will address not only this gentleman's situation, but the hundreds of commercial lots along the highways that we need for retail sales and those types of things in the area. That's my rant.
Thank you, Mr. Kays. I think that's a good observation, and certainly something that we should look at, given the historic nature of some of these lots, certainly developed prior to the current standards going into place.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just one last comment regarding the parking stall depth in front of the garages. I would just note that one potential conflict would be the intrusion or extension of any vehicle that's parked for that garage out into that public alleyway, which would obstruct the free flow of traffic through that public alleyway. Just from an engineering traffic management standpoint, I wanted to make that note.
Thank you.
City engineer, where the parking is at right now, is that on private property, or did you say that's on public right-of-way of Broadway, where the current customer parking is?
The parking on the frontage of the building appears to be in the public right-of-way, in the Broadway street right-of-way.
So basically what we have is almost like a C1 use being conducted in a C3 zone. Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve with the caveat that there be no parking to the westerly side of the property that would encroach the public alley.
I believe that's the east side of the
the
property.
east side.
Excuse me, west-east.
Uptown, downtown.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any additional discussion before we take a vote?
I guess I'm a little hesitant just I mean, I appreciate what he's trying to do there, and I appreciate all that. I'm just concerned, I guess, down the road, and we have snow and parking for the next owner someday. I don't know.
Mr. Henman, if you'd like to speak, go ahead and approach the microphone here.
I've been told that they are talking of abandoning that alleyway in the future. It's not in the works now, but it's a thought that the city is having. So, I mean, if that would happen, we would actually want, say, yes, we want to be able to access it from 212 because that would be our only in and out. But they
I
have
think
a
we can
hard
have
time.
Mr. Von Eye weigh in on that to see if there's any ongoing discussion at City Hall to.
Not that I've been part of, Mr. Chairman.
So I think at this point we have to approach it as if that's not a consideration.
Mr. Van Eye, is there any city utilities that we're aware of that are in that alley?
There is not any public sanitary sewer, and I see Mark is here from municipal utilities, and he could speak to the whether electric, gas, or water may be back there.
Mark Meyer, Utilities. Actually, we have gas, electric, there's telephone, cable TV. Our summer project is we're actually burying all the overhead electric this summer. And so even if that alley was vacated, it would still have to remain as a utility easement because it's plumb full of utilities.
Thank you. So we do have a motion on the table. We'll go ahead and take a vote. Jill?
Kays,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Stein,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
and Ford.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Jill. Item 7 is open public comment. If there's anybody here to speak a short time on something that wasn't on the agenda for the Board of Adjustment, now would be the time. Seeing none. Any old business?
No.
I'll take a motion to adjourn. A second? I have a second by Mr. Stein. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned.
Yes.
First item on the agenda is invitation for public comment participant submittal. If you'd like to sign up to speak for 5 minutes or so at the end, go ahead and approach the microphone if it's on something that's not on the agenda already.
Blake, I'm going to take the time just to note that there was a public notice put out in the July 6th paper that there would be a public hearing for the preliminary plan of the Lakes of Willow Creek and River Ridge Estates, but those are not going to be on this meeting, as you'll see on the agenda, but they will be pushed to the August 8th meeting.
Thank you for
Hopefully.
the clarity, Brandy.
Yep.
Does that require then a republic notice for those?
Say with
Yep.
a new public notice, right?
Yes, yep.
Thank you.
Jump the gun on that one.
So item 2 on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. I'll need a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Colhane,
Second.
and second by Ford. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 3 is the approval of the minutes from the June 20th, 2019 meeting.
So moved.
A motion? And second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Item 4 is a resolution number 2019-22. Brandy?
Thank you, Blake. So this is a TIF number 8. Previously, we saw TIF number 7 for the Terex project. This is being requested by Watertown Development Company for the city's participation in helps with improvements to the infrastructure to Lot 1 of Calvin Industrial Park, as well as for the street improvements. And this is for a new business being Comprehensive Logistics, Inc., coming to town. And with that, I will turn it over to Tracy. She'll give you guys some background on it. But as far as the Plan Commission goes, as far as SDCL 11-9-4, recommendation by Planning Commission for creation of district, designation of boundaries. The Planning Commission shall designate the boundaries of a district that the Planning Commission recommends be created. The Planning Commission shall submit the recommendation to the governing body. So you guys are looking at the boundaries.
Thank you.
It's all yours, Tracy.
Go ahead
Tracy
and-
Stein, Watertown Development Company.
Thank you, Ms. Stein.
So what you have is TIF number 8 that I wrote up the project plan for. Comprehensive Logistics is going to be supporting the Terex, the new Terex facility with their warehouse parts and management distribution system. So they will be moving across the street, basically, and that will help them make their processes flow a lot better.
So there you go.
Quick question. We're going to be looking at TIF number 9, which is the property immediately to the south of this. Is that correct?
Correct.
Why didn't we bring just all in one single TIF?
We wanted to keep them separate because we're borrowing money.
Okay, I got it.
Okay.
With the value of this construction project, you would have no problem retiring the bonds that you're going to need to purchase to do the improvements within the 20-year time frame that
Yeah.
most TIFs are allowed to go.
And there are going to be no city bonds for this project. It'll
Okay.
be all funded through the Watertown Development Company, which
Okay.
will be borrowing money
All right.
for the project. And we do, based on the increment values over the 20 years, they will be paid back.
You're going to be whole.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? I do have a question on the site plan. Previously, we had looked at the infrastructure installations, and the previous site plan didn't show the sidewalk going all the way to the corner. That came up during discussion. The proposal, though, would be to install all the infrastructure up front during this development.
Yes, that is correct. And that is included in the project plan, that will be included, the sidewalks as well as the lift station that was required.
Thank you.
Because Tracy, if I'm correct, all improvements have to be made within the first 5 years of the TIF to be able to
Correct.
make them.
Yes, and those numbers can change within those 5 years as well. So these are just preliminary estimates for costs. They're still coming in either way.
And we also have a development agreement with them where it says that they'll be done in 2, the improvements. And those are all spelled out. Now, Blake, were you referring to the sidewalk along 29th there, the south bypass?
Yes, going north towards Walmart.
Because we decided not to connect it, but it will still extend a certain amount, but we won't connect it to the intersection just for safety of pedestrian traffic.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just to provide some clarity on that subject, as I recall, the discussion was because there were no other sidewalks in the vicinity of that intersection, it's standard not to lead the pedestrians out into an intersection without a ramp on the opposite side or across either direction or kitty corner from that intersection. So we were going to keep a separation there until a future date when sidewalk is constructed on the opposite sides of that intersection.
Yeah, because I think if we were to look at the aerial, there's no continuation of that sidewalk until you get to the Walmart property.
That's correct. I believe it's void of sidewalk for quite some distance there.
Yep. Thank you for the clarity. Any additional discussion before we take a vote?
Just a quick question. Is this primarily going to be an office building, or is it a manufacturing building?
Parts management and distribution.
I'm sorry?
Parts management and distribution. So it'll just be a lot of shelving for parts for Terex and storage.
But not necessarily manufacturing of the product.
Correct, no.
My recollection is we're capped by statute or ordinance on the amount that we can authorize via TIF. Where does this put us? Where does 8 and 9 put us? I think we were at a very small fraction.
Far below, yeah.
Wasn't it like 0.4%?
Yeah, 0.3, I think, is what I had in the plan. And you can't be over 10.
Okay, thank you.
We got a lot more tests coming at us.
Good deal.
If there's no additional discussion, we'll go ahead and take a vote. Brandy?
Culhane,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes.
Stein, Kays,
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Brandy. We'll move on to the next one, resolution number 2019-23.
Thank you, Blake. So then, as we alluded to, this is TIF number 9, and this is the same situation. This will be for the improvements to Lot 3 of Kelvin Industrial Park, and this will be for the location of West Side Implement coming to town. And then Tracy can provide any further information.
Yes. And I think in the notices that went out, it said that West Side Implement would be coming to Watertown. I just want to make it clear that it's going to be a second location for them. They're not leaving Clark.
It's relocating.
Yes.
Yes. They'll be in both.
Yep. So West Side Implement wants to be in Watertown to get those additional customers off the interstate and with that Terex traffic and everything over there. So they're going to be putting up a 16,000 square foot building and having some product on display south of the comprehensive logistics building. The improvements that they're going to be making will be mainly public. None of the money will be going towards their building. It'll be for sidewalks, site excavation.
And this is also fully funded through the Development Corporation?
Yes.
And this is retail then? This site will be retail? Or,
It'll be an implement.
Commercial, yeah.
but I can come
It's a
there.
service provider, yeah.
Yeah, but I can come and buy.
You could
implement.
come and buy equipment as well and get
Okay.
it serviced, yes.
And service, okay.
Yes.
There's a few other implement dealerships right around there.
I want to just commend the Development Corporation. I thought both of the tax increment financing plans were very well written, very well laid out, and because of that, it makes it real easy just to make another motion to approve.
I'll second that, or you already
I
said,
think
sorry.
Stein beat you to it
Sorry.
there.
I will note that I believe the owner of West Side occasionally stores my Zamboni, so if the board wants, I will abstain from voting if we have a quorum. I don't personally know him, I just know that he stores our,
I trust your judgment on that, Mr. Cohen.
I don't see a conflict.
If there's no additional discussion, we'll go ahead and take a vote.
Cohane,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes.
Stein, Kays, Ford.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Brandy. Moving on to item 6 on the agenda, resolution number 2019-13.
Thank you, Blake. So this is finally our downtown aesthetics ordinance, and we've been working on it since March. And so in front of you is the final product. You'll see that there are, anything else that's not explicitly listed in there will fall back to the underlying zoning district, which is all C1. And then I guess if you guys have any questions or things that you disagree with. But I believe we
I'll go ahead
we
and
have
open the
hashed a lot
public
of it
hearing
out.
on this if anybody's here to speak on behalf or against.
My only comment, again, is I think it's good work from staff. I think they did a really good job. It's a new car, we'll test drive it. We might have to, change the tires somewhere down the road, but I think it's a good start.
Brandy, just for the public record, could you give a brief synopsis of how we've derived this this draft and now final draft that's before the commission this evening?
So we started off just wanting to have a downtown aesthetics ordinance for our downtown to uphold the integrity of the historical district. And so by looking at model ordinances in other communities and that we had talked about and you guys had suggested, and pulling anything from there, we also looked into our existing Gateway Overlay District and kind of used that as a guidance to keep things consistent. And then just picked apart, we looked at illustrations as far as the transparency aspect goes. We talked a lot about setbacks and that we wanted to include that so there could be outdoor patios and whatnot downtown. Otherwise, to have the 0 setback as the C1 district is today.
I see Mr. Craig is still in the audience. Given his experience, would he be willing to talk to us a little bit about maybe Fargo or some other cities and what he's seen in terms of these types of ordinance? You certainly don't have to. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but we have been working, irrespective of your project, we had run into an instance where there was some minor development downtown and there was no aesthetic requirements in place and it didn't really conform to what we've got going on. And so in the last couple months, we've been working on an ordinance to sort of promote a somewhat unified downtown aesthetic, particularly in relation to setback on the street front, so you don't end up with a parking lot and then a building,
Right.
on these walkable streets. That was the primary concern, and then the second concern, I think, was the transparent space from 0 or from 2 to 10 feet.
Right.
I just was curious what your experiences were in Fargo, what their ordinance looks like, or what you think works or doesn't work, and it will, indirectly impact your business.
Yeah, correct. Up in Fargo, our land downtown is like $30 a square foot. So we don't have surface parking lots. We're trying to eliminate those. I think even, with the city of Watertown, with the cost for snow removal, especially this last winter and things like that, and hauling it, where to put it, things like that, the removal of those is kind of some of the discussions I've had with city staff and things, and taking those surface parking lots and putting, multi-level parking ramps, things like that. Because of that, we don't have the need to worry about a parking lot being in front of a building, so to speak. I think, Brandy had sent me the initial what you guys were working on, things like that, and it addressed a lot of the exterior materials and things like that. The only thing I've run into in Fargo with the transparency is they wanted to have a certain amount of percentage of glass on the main level. That was great to a degree, but what you ended up having then is as you're driving by at night and you have these main level parking garages, indoor heated parking garages, now all of a sudden you see all the cars sitting in there. So like on my properties, I went and I tinted all the windows so that you do have glass, but you aren't seen inside at night because it's a real distraction. So with the tinting, at least it has the glass front and the clean look and things like that. But when you get into more of defining the exterior materials, I mean, we got away, like, there's no steel siding, nothing even resembling steel siding, things like that. There's a requirement for a percentage of brick. You know, even drive it as, or stucco is reduced to a minimal percentage and things like that. But I think there's some keys to that, and there's also storefront funding and help that I think is going to be really mandatory for cleaning up a lot of these blocks, because you have a lot of really cool existing buildings, but if there's some matching funds availability for the existing owners, that's going to, you know, spur them to do some of those improvements. If they see that you know, there's matching funds with the city. So not sure if that answers your question, but
I think it certainly helps, and again, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's fine.
You appear to be an expert in this particular area, and I was just curious
Try to
if
be.
there was anything that you thought, from the ordinance standpoint, that you thought really worked or was effective, or on the flip side, was ineffective or kind of hamstrung development.
yeah, you know, in Fargo, it always came down to they had one person that made the final decision kind of initially for the, you know, whether it was staff supported or not. And there, you know, it can get more defined after that. Our head planning director up there, Nicole Crutchfield, is an architect. So she had the final say on the materials and things like that. And like on one of my buildings, I put, you know, rolled steel top to bottom, and it looked really cool until the heat hit, and then it started oil canning. And so we ripped it down because it had that wavy effect. I mean, you know, so there's some give and take on things like that. But I think if you got the people that are putting the money into downtown, whether it be new projects or, you know, remodeling and things like that, they're going to want the best aesthetic that they possibly can. I think there's, as you guys roll through that, and Fargo's learned that, there's affordable ways to get the look you want. It doesn't have to be all high-end costs and things like that. So, but Brandy's been doing a great job, so she's got it under control.
I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Mr. Craig.
You're welcome.
Any other public comments?
Just a quick question, Brandy. While are there any actual buildings on the historic register downtown? Are we aware?
Aren't they all within that?
Well, it's a historic district, but there's a different designation, historic district versus historic register in the buildings, and there are different standards in place when you do work on those buildings. I just wanted to make sure it says historic materials shall be retained where possible, where not feasible, compatible materials shall be encouraged. You might not have that much flexibility on some of those buildings, so I just was more of a comment to you as an administrator.
Sounds good. Yeah, that'll be good to find out, just so then if somebody does come in and wants to do redevelopment on a historic building. Otherwise, if that's like, you know, other regulations that need to be met, then I feel like that would.
Just a recommendation that maybe I would contact SHPO out in Pier just to see if they can provide any other guidance or, you know, what they know about our uptown historic areas.
So do you think that adding that to this ordinance?
I think it's fine as it's written, but I think as we get in the car again and drive, I want to make sure that you guys are prepared, that you're not giving guidance and direction to individuals to do something, and next thing you know, somebody gets pinched by historic preservation.
Right. I mean, I don't think it would be. I think it might be useful to have something like that in the ordinance, though. So it's just
I don't know if we have to
explicit.
replicate it. I mean, you can always reference other sections. We don't have to have everything spelled out. But I think, again, I would just like to see this moving forward. But as we start to drive it, and as you research and you become more cognizant of what the other aspects of historic preservation are, it might be just a good conversation that staff has with the state.
Sounds good. I mean, we could just put a statement in there too that says something about upholding the historic registry buildings that.
You have to be very careful
They don't apply.
I want to be very careful though too, because I don't want to put an onus on individuals that, you know, if there is some flexibility, when you probably realize when you start rehabbing historic buildings, it can become very expensive real fast if you follow everything exactly to the T, and if there's ways of maneuvering that system, you want to be flexible.
Especially with the historical overlay or the historical registry. Yeah, but it also, like, you know, it falls back on the owner of the property, and usually that's in the deed. There's usually a deed restriction on that that's put in place once it's on the registry. But yeah, when you get into that and trying to uphold those standards for the historical registry, it gets very expensive. So.
And with that restriction, that's the comment I was going to make too, that would be a property owner's responsibility as far as following the National Registry of Historic Places guidelines and regulations for being on that registry. And certainly if staff were to come across that, we would advise them of the same on any subsequent applications.
Well, I think it's one of the things too you can promote, I think, from the city, is that if people are going to rehab these and put the money and the work into it, that they should also then, once that work is done, then put it on the historical registry, because then it preserves it.
It preserves it. It makes more of a brand that you're creating in the area.
Yep.
Has there been a motion? I'd make a motion to approve.
I just have one question, though.
All right, fine.
I'm going to. Now, no, just kidding. Question, the Maple Street, across from the courthouse, why are we including that half of that block and the same on 2nd Street, on the other side of the Congregational Church, only to kind of include those? And I know there's a house in there, and I know that that's, no, they're not. I'm just asking why aren't we just including those in that district? Since it is across from the courthouse, wouldn't it be kind of nice if we took that half and that half?
It's because it's mostly principally commercial uses in those areas where the lines are drawn, and not other non-commercial uses.
Right, and it's consistent with the historic district that was established previously.
So what you're saying is that those areas that we did not leave in there, then we don't care what they do there in the future.
My take on that would be, these are the areas that comport with the historic preservation district, and we should be more cognizant to encourage redevelopment of those areas to certain standards than maybe other parts of the downtown, uptown, Holiday Inn.
I looked all through this chapter here, and it does say downtown in all reference locations. So.
Yeah, it is downtown now. It's hot.
I'd make a motion now to approve the resolution to 2019-13.
Have a motion? Have a second?
Second.
Second by Hanson. Before we take a vote on it, I just do have a couple of questions or comments for Brandy. Previously, I had some concerns on the transparency, particularly in reference to the clear windows in relation to existing buildings that don't meet those requirements, including historic buildings. City Hall being one of those that does not have 50% clear window view. How are we going to approach those property owners if they want to do any alterations to their buildings?
In the beginning of this ordinance, there's the statement that says that this will only apply to, let me find it. Okay, the downtown overlay district regulations shall only be applicable to new construction and substantial improvement permitted after the effective day of this ordinance, which will be September 14th, 2019.
How do we quantify substantial improvement?
Over 50% of the value of the structure.
Okay. So if they're doing significant internal work to their building and they don't have windows today. So I think the Longworth building across from the old Medical Arts building is a good example of one. Would that necessitate the installation of windows all along that building front?
Yeah.
And is there any option for the applicant then to appeal that? I see some language around the material use that they could appeal it back to the Plan Commission at the end of this chapter.
Yep. And that's just for the materials. Otherwise, they always have the variance relief that they could ask for. And then if the Longworth building is also on the historic registry, that might trump this.
So there's going to be some channels that the applicant has available to them for us to consider extenuating circumstances.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any additional discussion?
Good work, Brandy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and take a vote then.
Culhane.
Yes.
Dargits Johnson.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes.
Stein. Kays.
Yep.
Ford.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Item 7 is open public comments. I didn't see anybody sign up earlier, so we'll move on to new business.
I have none.
Any old business?
Nope.
Any need for executive session?
No.
I'll take a motion to adjourn. A motion by Stein. Second by Dargits Johnson. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Go-